Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar titled Increase Your Revenue and Reach, How to Leverage Marketplaces. Thank you so much for joining. Marketplaces, also joined as platforms, are a great channel to ensure revenue growth during and after the pandemic. So stay tuned to learn more about latest trends, best practices, and keys to achieving success for your marketplace. My name is Mélisande Mual and I'm the publisher of the Paypers, the Netherlands-based independent leading global source of news and analysis for professionals in payments, fintech, and commerce. And I'm delighted to co-host and moderate this webinar with Limonetik. The Limonetik team realized that in this era, it's key to share best practices of leaders and experts in this industry with companies that are interested in setting up a marketplace to enable growth and cross-border expansion. And we are so excited to see so many of you joining the conversation today. So before introducing today's panelists, I would like to start with some quick notes regarding housekeeping. The panel discussion will take 35 minutes and we will have approximately 15 to 20 minutes for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. You can ask questions at any time throughout the presentation by typing your questions in the Q&A panel. So please mention the name of the panelist you would like to address the questions to. During the presentation, we will compile questions and the panelists will take as many as possible at the end of the webinar. So we have a great panel today and I would like to ask you to introduce yourself briefly. So please turn on your cameras. Great. So, Masha, if you could please kick off.
Hello, good afternoon there. So I'm Masha Cilliers and I'm a payments consultant. I've been in payments for over 25 years and I'm currently a specialist payments partner at a consulting firm called BE Shaping the Future.
So Jordan, could you please unmute?
Yeah, sorry. So I'm Jordan Graison. I'm in charge of sales and partnership at Limonetik, payment platform for marketplaces and PSPs and acquirers.
And myself, Dickel Sooriah. I am from Mirakl. I lead marketing in EMEA for Mirakl, who's the leading provider of marketplace and platform software.
Okay, thank you. So with the panel, we will address the following topics today. First of all, we will set the scene. What is a marketplace? How big is this market? And how will this market develop over the next couple of years? We will talk about some recent success stories and case studies in different industries. We will talk about the difference between the e-commerce channel and the marketplace channel. And lastly, we will talk about what it takes to set up a marketplace and what are the keys to achieving success. So Masha, before talking about trends, what is your definition of a marketplace and what is a platform, and are these terms replaceable?
Very good starting question as well. The marketplace is a different thing to many people, right? What we tend to do is to think about anything from kind of market stalls to eBay or Amazon as a marketplace. I would prefer, for the purposes of this discussion, to focus on platforms which provide buyers and sellers an interaction for which they process the entire transaction. So not just the marketplaces where you kind of meet each other and then you go off and do the transaction separately, but those where you meet each other, buy from each other, and the payment is performed by the within the marketplace.
Okay, great, thanks. So next slide, please, Jordan.
So that, yeah, this will lead us nicely to the next slide. As I've mentioned a couple of names already, we did some research at BE last year as we were looking at, well, what happened to the marketplaces? How did they evolve? There's suddenly been a lot of talk about both marketplace and platform. There's also gig economy, shared economy. All of those effectively could be grouped into the same industry. So we've split the industry, if you like, into the three major categories: the retail and product marketplaces, services, travel and manufacturers, and then the shared economy. The difference, so I'll explain a little bit again. If we look from the 1995, which is when some of the initial marketplaces such as eBay started, this was really a retailer either selling products themselves, like an Amazon case, starting with books and allowing others to sell other products, or just not selling anything themselves and adding, allowing third parties to sell and interact with buyers. Now, this was very much prevalent for the first 5-7 years of the marketplace history. Further on, then we saw that that platform became quite interesting for those who were more of a kind of pure marketplaces in, and they were not in retail, but in other sectors. So companies like Zopa, which is P2P lending, travel companies, and many others started to emerge in this particular sector. Often they don't have services of their own, and they will be helping, effectively being a platform for others to sell the products and the services. Travel sector is a very interesting example in itself, because travel agents have always been some kind of a platform. Right? They just don't call themselves marketplaces. So again, this is an area we're starting to look at more and more with our view of the marketplaces. And then the shared economy. And under shared, we can put the gig, we can put any of the new fintechs, which effectively, again, don't have their own product, and they allow those who have something to share it with others, say a taxi ride or a property on Airbnb. What we've seen is that, you see the diagram there shows a huge growth. According to some of the statistics we've looked at, the marketplaces account for more than 50% of retail, so this is product online sales. The growth has been fantastic. Generally, when we did the research last year, we saw the overall the marketplace to be worth about $1.8 trillion. We'll go to the next one, Jordan. So why are they growing so much? So I think, again, everybody will have, every country and different types of marketplaces will have different reasons. But here we've looked again at some of the research globally. And there are a few things that I wanted to just throw out there for you. Really, on the graph, you see there on the right, seeing that some Paypers studies, people looked at better prices being the most important, then discounted shipping being important, whilst broader selection is also growing in importance. And it kind of depends on the region which of those factors are important. Again, when we look deeper into some of the other underlying factors, the e-commerce has grown in general over the last 20 years. So the customers are more comfortable with buying goods and services, not just from companies they know, but broadly speaking, from many different countries. Importantly, we also see that the cross-border sales are growing, and the customers prefer to buy things from abroad. So if you're buying a French designer bag, you want to buy it in France. You don't want to buy it in China necessarily. And equally, if you're buying a German toaster, then you want to buy it from a Germany, if not German manufacturer. Marketplaces also grew because they are quite an easy facilitator for international expansion for retailers. If you're a small to medium retailer, for you to open up a branch to sell, deliver in Germany, France, or even further afield, US or Japan, it's going to be very complicated. There's been a lot of technology providers allowing you to push all your goods and services to Amazon, eBay, and various other marketplaces. Also, not to be forgotten, the consumers themselves, they're looking for unique and genuine products. As I said, there's always been challenge with design items being of genuine or not genuine origin, but also the uniqueness of it. And people don't even think twice about, pressing a button and buying some tea from China. It might take 2 weeks to deliver, but it's going to be the particular tea. Talking about personal example, I've definitely got a few things delivered during the lockdown from very random selection of countries via my Amazon purchases. But the last couple of things I want to mention here is the businesses and the franchises. Now, the businesses have not used marketplaces. It's always been thought of more as a P2P, like eBay type platform. But as you start looking at the businesses, the interaction, and I know Dickel will talk a lot about this later as well, the interaction between the businesses, so buying, the procurement, purchasing goods and services from your suppliers. Dealing with your suppliers can be replaced in a platform world, and you can replace the purchase order creation, the onboarding, the invoicing, the invoice payments with a very simple Amazon type 24 to 48 hours onboarding, and that when the product is delivered, then the payment is automatically triggered. So it simplifies things seriously. And then finally, the franchises I've mentioned before. Again, we see a number of franchises, especially hotels, restaurants. Often it takes them 2 to 3 months to get paid by the franchisee. Now, if they are processing the transactions in the marketplace way, then they'll actually get the payment as soon as the transaction has been settled, cutting out a lot of waiting time. So, you know, all of those and many more reasons are driving that amazing growth. So here's some of the stats that, again, we've looked at last year. So we've looked at B2C e-commerce revenues per region in billions. So that was the year before last, as research was completed last year. So overall e-commerce is worth about 2.8 trillion, with US and Europe being not dissimilar size. A very large portion of it is in Asia. Again, for the purposes of that particular research, we split it into those 3 regions. The current marketplaces, or current at the time of 2018, were 1.1 trillion. Now, what we did, as we looked at the different types of retailers, B2C type marketplace possibilities, we looked at department stores, we looked at manufacturers, and we looked at the probability of them being able to use the marketplace as a platform. And we established that almost double at that time in 2018 could have been working effectively through marketplaces. So the revenues going through marketplaces, 1.1 trillion, could effectively be 2.1 trillion at the time. So let's move.
Masha,
Yeah.
one of the big winners during this pandemic is our big tech companies like Amazon. How can European retailers or marketplaces compete with Amazon or these big tech companies? What strategies do you see European players take?
This is a very good question. In fact, a very important question. When we did this research, you might have spotted there was a little box there saying that about 90% or 95% at the time of all those marketplace volumes actually come from the top 100, and that's your Amazon, Alibaba, eBay, and so forth. We do see that changing in Europe as the local marketplaces are getting stronger hold. There are marketplaces, and again, the statistics are different, but there's some a good example in France, where my colleagues are located, La Redoute, which is the Galerie Lafayette online arm, and they decided to go the marketplace. There is Zalando in many European countries, including Holland, Mélisande. There is Frugo, which is a UK company, again, which has been quite big. Then there are some more traditional companies like Otto in Germany who have embraced partially the marketplace model as well. Cdiscount, Pixmania, a few others. What we do see is as the markets get more sophisticated, the consumers are beginning to understand and rely on the local brands. Consumers prefer the local brands. And I think more importantly, and we'll be talking about it later, is how we feel that the large retailers or platform, various intermediaries should be taking the initiative to become those platforms. It is complicated to build it all from scratch, but the solutions that the guys are going to be talking about, it's actually not that difficult. Literally last week, I think I saw an announcement that Facebook is allowing SMEs in Europe to sell on their platform. Now, again, that's another part of the European revenue that's going through a big American digital company. So definitely there's a lot of opportunities, but we do see the trend that it is growing, and there are more and more local players.
Thanks, Masha.
I'm trying to guess what the next slide is going to be, Jordan. Yeah, and this is the last few things I just wanted to show you guys in terms of, there's been a lot in the press recently about the marketplaces. If you just jump one back, Jordan, please. There's been a lot of research. Again, we did research at BE, Shaping the Future, but also McKinsey did research at the bottom left corner there, talking about the procurement function. I've mentioned to you the B2Bs looking to move from some of their legacy processes. We see the digitalization, again, given the current situation with the lockdowns and COVID, we saw a lot of supply chains being disrupted. The farms that were supplying restaurants could not supply restaurants anymore, but they couldn't just overnight start supplying the consumers, and vice versa. We've seen a lot of that happening, and marketplace with a plug and play of new suppliers literally within a matter of days. This is something that could have been addressed. So my colleagues will be talking a little bit more about a specific French example. So over to back to you guys.
Okay, thanks, Masha. So over to Dickel, who will talk about some marketplace examples.
Thank you very much, Masha, for setting the scene. So the way I wanted to talk about the marketplace revolution today is to really tell you three flavors of what is in fact the same revolution. So my opening slide is an initiative that Mirakl, Limonetik, and other partners have been involved in France, which is the Stop COVID-19.fr project, which is really Mirakl initially answering the call of the French government, asking us to help them build a marketplace to streamline the distribution of PPE products to first responders, public hospitals, all types of health centers, pharmacies. And so what we were able to do is in a matter of 48 hours, set up a full marketplace, obviously with the e-commerce functions, build up a team of onboarding for both buyers and sellers, because this is very much a B2B marketplace. And I might also add a closed marketplace because it was important for the French government to reserve access to this platform to the people who really needed PPE, sanitizing gel, masks, protecting masks, gowns at the start of the pandemic. And so starting initially with one product category, which was sanitizing gel, we quickly augmented to a wide range of protective equipment. So we have all the protective equipment categories represented on the platform today. And if you jump on the next slide, you'll see how formidable that marketplace model can be in terms of the way that it scales. So the next slide will show you the amount of products that were delivered on the platform. And so, like Masha said, this is not just presenting buyers to sellers. This is an actual transactional platform, which means that we are building into it the most advanced B2B marketplace features that is required for hospitals and office managers from some of the largest companies in France who are buying in terms of amount purchase points that can go all the way up to hundreds of thousands euros. So basically we need very advanced buying features, very advanced payment features like escrow services to secure the down payment on those very large orders. The numbers on this slide are actually from mid-May, which means there are 2 weeks of transactions lacking in those numbers. But what they show is that with the right technology, with the right onboarding teams, both from a seller perspective and from a buyer perspective, you can actually build a business which is, I would say, something that is close to being among the top B2B marketplaces in France right now. So this is a testimony to the scalability of a marketplace and more specifically of a B2B marketplace. Now, if you jump to the next slide, I'm going to talk about a slightly different flavor of marketplace strategy, but which is more to some extent closer to us because it's a retail B2C marketplace. So this is a picture on the left from the CEO of H&M, who really sees the marketplace strategy. Masha spoke a lot in the initial numbers about those bigger generalist marketplaces, so the Amazons and the eBays. What's interesting here in that flavor of the revolution is that it's a very curated marketplace. So you have H&M, who is a single brand retailer, saying, I'm going to launch a marketplace under a new brand, which I'm calling a Found, and this is going to be my multi-brand strategy. So this is an example of how a large retailer like H&M is using a marketplace to actually test a multi-brand strategy. So a Found went online, and initially in Sweden, in the Netherlands, and are now building on their initial success, actually opening up physical stores under the Found brand and leveraging an omni-channel strategy. Yes, Mélisande, you had a question.
Yeah, you mentioned they started in Sweden and recently as well in the Netherlands. What have been the learnings of their first trial markets? Because I learned that they're now expanding to Germany, but what learnings do they take with them?
I think the first learning is that I would say two things. The first thing is it's interesting when you're testing to build a specific brand, but when it's scaling, when it's working, there is value into bringing it back to the mothership. So I think this is one of the interesting lessons learned, because the second lesson learned explains that, which is the scalability. So they've reached 180,000 offers, over 600 sellers have now been onboarded. So there's a proven capability to actually, for a single brand retailer, to actually have a multi-brand strategy. So I think those two learnings are really what is driving them to making this a more widespread European effort. And I think you can see what's going to be the future of H&M with that strategy.
Cool, thanks.
So this is flavor 2 of the marketplace revolution. If we now jump onto the next slide, we'll see what is flavor 3, which is also related to my Stop COVID-19 story, but really what's behind the growth. And Masha will have some more numbers to illustrate that growth. What we are seeing now is that starting in 2018, I would say we've really at Mirakl seen the trend of B2B marketplaces arriving. So initially, we've seen this trend from manufacturers, so people like Tetra Pak, as shown on this slide, wanting to actually complement their product strategy, build an assortment around the spare parts that go with the ecosystem that they are driving in the food and beverage business. So this is an example of food and beverage business, manufacturing. We have so many other examples of leaders in their fields using their marketplaces either to go direct to the consumer or working with their wholesalers to actually reach their end customer. So this B2B marketplace trend is testifies about the willingness of those B2B buyers to get the same experience that they have in B2C, but it also shows that beyond the digitization of the buyer behavior, there's also the ability for a manufacturer or a wholesaler to really put themselves at the center of the whole ecosystem. So this particular slide is an example of the MRO, so maintenance, repairs, and operations use case, so very much around spare parts. We also have a lot of use cases that we see growing really fast. One of them is from the other use case that Masha touched upon, which is those franchise businesses. We have a lot of examples of organizations that are really either fragmented because of huge M&A that have happened in the sector, but people that need a central sourcing platform for a very distributed and franchised company using marketplaces to really streamline the way in which they distribute products. So B2B marketplaces is really the third flavor of the revolution. Now, if you move to the next slide, I just want to quickly explain why we see those fantastic results in terms of scalability. The number one explanation on the next slide, you'll see what we generally have in e-commerce is really the pipeline model. So you're trying to increase your assortment, you're trying to expose more and more SKUs, but the sheer time it takes to actually go through sourcing, negotiate the wholesale agreements, find the distributors, and get the products across to the customers, this is proving to be very much less efficient and scalable to the more agile and fragmented model, which is the marketplace model, very much different from the pipeline model, which is my next slide. You'll see that in terms of the way in which the relationships are built across the value chain, it's just way more simpler to get those agreements up and running. So on the next slide, which is the marketplace model, you'll see how when a marketplace operator puts itself at the center of that ecosystem, the ability to really onboard sellers either in a curated marketplace like the H&M one, or even the Stop COVID-19 one, or a non-curated marketplaces like some of those larger retailers that Mirakl has as customers, it's way more easier to really get that commission-based model going. So we're talking about transaction-based models, and this is really what's explaining the growth behind the numbers that I've shown for the three flavors of that marketplace revolution that I've shown. And so on the next slide, Masha is going to talk a little bit about what we've seen in terms of numbers.
I think that Masha just tries to dial in again. Let's wait a moment for her.
So while Masha dials in, I can just quickly comment on those numbers. This slide basically shows the difference between e-commerce and marketplace, right? So you can have a pure e-commerce business that is based on this pipeline model I was referring to, but what's really growing fast is the marketplace model. So the marketplace model, which is really easier to scale compared to a traditional pipeline model, explain the numbers that explains the difference between marketplace and pure e-commerce. There's one golden nugget that I really like that was made public very recently by Amazon, is that the marketplace portion of Amazon's business is now 4 times its retail business. So the marketplace business of Amazon, it's 4 times its retail business. It's a testimony to the scalability of the marketplace model. And from a pure, so it's a commission-based model, but in terms of top line, the marketplace model of Amazon is now the equivalent of what is the whole AWS, so the Amazon Web Services business of Amazon. And so it's a testimony of the way that this business has scaled for Amazon, and it's also a testimony of how impactful it can be on the top line.
Jordan,
I can comment myself. Yeah, I can comment myself those slides. So Masha was about to explain that marketplace payment requirements are complex because it's not only about processing payments. You know, you have a much more, let's say, duties when it comes about marketplace, because you deal with the transactions. So they will be not only about, your traditional e-commerce relationship where you just, have to integrate a gateway to sign with an acquirer, or potentially using the full service model where you sign with an acquirer and you use the service of a gateway. And here we talk about something that is much more complex for marketplaces, because they have to onboard their sellers on the platforms in order to offer the payment services to them. They have to manage their fees and reporting, because as mentioned, Dickel mentioned, it's a pure commission-based model. So there will be some commission to be calculated. So explaining that you have complex, accounting processes for the reconciliation, and knowing that already in e-commerce, the reconciliation process could be really, really tricky, because you have many payment methods, as Masha was explaining on the slide on the payment processing. You have alternative payment methods, international cards, wallets, credits. So it could become really, really quickly tricky to reconcile. And you have also the impact of the regulations, because as you onboard, yourself as a third party, you have to respect the rules in Europe. It's clearly framed. The PSD 1 and 2 are clearly framing, the relationship between marketplace sellers and buyers in order to protect the buyers. So the Europe, took some specific, directives pretty early when marketplaces, emerged, especially, in 2008, if I remember well, for the PSD 1. So it was about the moment where Amazon started, to take some space. In Europe, when they see Amazon coming on the corner, they always take some, measures, to contain Amazon. So the PSD 1 was created pretty for that, to protect the consumers, and so it implies also new rules for the marketplace, such as escrowing the funds in order to protect the buyers and the sellers. Also, you have to take in account how you integrate this whole ERP systems and marketplace platform like Mirakl, because it's you have to be sure that the marketplace and the payment providers are kind of synchronized, in order to be sure that the merchants are paid and settled, and you have to be sure that your web shop is also compatible. And also you have to be, as I was mentioned, compliant with all the rules, schemes rules, European payment institution rules, AML. You also need to be sure that you also check your vendors. So the complexity of making a marketplace is pretty huge. In fact, if you look at the duties that they have, and what we most of the time what we see is that it's kind of like a paradox, for marketplace. You have what I call the marketplace paradox, because those marketplaces, as you understood from Dickel and from Masha, are really they are expecting some flexibility, so to fit into their model. So because they have many buyers and many sellers, but this paradox, is also marketplace, as they are just only an intermediate in the way that they do payments, but also selling. They also don't like the complexity. So it's kind of a paradox, because you are waiting for a full flexibility, but you don't want to integrate any complexity to get this flexibility. So it will be really, really complicated for the payment to be integrated into the marketplace. And also what is interesting, is like the marketplace, most of the time they are pretty expecting the same user experience and product experience, when they integrate the payment service providers, so they are expecting only one API to integrate, only one platform to deal with. They don't want to have, really specific integration to plan. So the experience that they want to have should be as easy as if they were integrating themselves, the product, whereas payment product, whereas obviously, they are integrating products from a third party, which could lead to really tricky situation. I don't know if Masha is back.
Jordan,
No?
can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course, yeah.
As previously mentioned, marketplaces are also a great way to scale and to expand internationally. Talking about complexity, also related to payments, when does the real complexity kicks in? And when you
the real complexity kicks in when the marketplace is scaling, and as Dickel mentioned, the marketplace model is a model for hyper growth, so the scalability of the marketplace is key. The marketplace will not stay only on one market, so they will start to expand everywhere. And so the problem is, as what you see on this slide, compliance is really important and plays an important, game into this. And when they want to open to another jurisdiction, so leaving Europe, for example, to start into the US, or leaving US to start in Europe, they will see an increased numbers of, stoppers, because they have to reintegrate potentially a payment service provider, because the payment service provider cannot cover Europe. They have to deal with the payout, with the risk of the FX, or the jurisdiction, because, for example, in the US and in Europe, jurisdictions are different. And so this is where it starts to be complicated. And what we have seen in the market, is some actors, trying to have a solution that could fit for everybody, for everybody. So this is the promise of the full service, and it's interesting, to see how the full service, is answering to those questions.
Okay, can you go to the next slide, Jordan?
Yeah, sure. So in this slide, we wanted to go into to explain to you how Mirakl and Limonetik was integrated, just for you to understand what was the mission of Limonetik into this whole setup. So Limonetik is a platform that is integrated with Mirakl.
Jordan, can you go to the next slide? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what I would do is, so the idea of this of our collaboration with Mirakl, and as Dickel mentioned, with the Stop COVID-19, is to provide an end-to-end service, for the marketplace that wants to be implemented. So they have an end-to-end marketplace management system with their platform that is a ready-to-go SaaS platform that could be used for medium, large company that is certified, and that helps, to quickly onboard sellers. And Limonetik is providing a unique payment API, so you don't have to, let's say, so we deal with this marketplace paradox that I was already explaining, because what we want to do and what we want to achieve, is to, let's say, having a framework to work for the marketplace itself, and not having to integrate only one provider, but could use their own acquirers, because having a bit of agnosticity when you want to grow internationally is good. And this is what we want to offer, while also, guaranteeing, all the connections and technical connections, available. So we provide a framework that is ready to use, only with one payment API, where we can swiftly onboard suppliers, that is full packaging all the services that is expecting for payment services. So processing, acquiring services, gateways, everything is into one package, and you can pick and choose into it. So we offer the great flexibility for the marketplace that they are expecting, while kind of tackle the complexity for this, in order to, let's say, help the marketplace, to expand globally, while providing a place to grow, and also helping them for everything that is the back office operations. That is a bit the type of the iceberg. Yeah.
Okay, Jordan. So if you start a marketplace, or you have a marketplace and you want to scale it up, what options lay on the table? I mean, what are sort of the, I mean, there's different providers that offer marketplace functionality and marketplace payments, but could you elaborate a little bit on the different options?
Yeah, interesting questions. So marketplace will have roughly 3 options. The first one is to start from scratch. So they will have integrate their gateways, they will choose their acquirers, acting as a merchant of record, and this is not the best way to do a marketplace, because the framework is not really compliant. Marketplaces will make the junction themselves between the pay-in and the payout. So there is a huge compliance risk, for the payment actors, and so this is the first model. The second model is much more a full service model, where the pay-in and the payout will be integrated by one actor, so solutions like ADN or Stripe, plays the game for that. So they will be able, to offer a service that will be fully integrated, and where the marketplace, even if they don't touch the money, they still have the responsibility to tell to the payment service provider to who should the money to be assigned to. So the junction will be cleaner, but will still be made by the marketplace. And you have the third option. The third option is really having just a framework of integration. You just integrate a payment API, and the rest, so settlement, onboardings, reconciliations, all of these services will be packaged by one actor. So marketplace will have nothing to do but to recruit vendors. And as Dickel was mentioning, recruiting vendors is key for the success of a marketplace and for the scalability. So if marketplace spend them time, to deal with compliance issues, complex systems, integration, back office operations, it's a huge investment, for the marketplace, and it's the part of the iceberg that you don't see, in fact, but it's the most costly, approach, is to find, all those components, from the back office. And by integrating a framework like Limonetik, you just reduce all this pain by providing only something that is that you can easily integrate. It's only one platform.
Okay, Jordan, thank you so much. Unfortunately, Masha and Dickel, they have some issues reconnecting, but it's let's still proceed because we have questions from the audience.
Okay.
So thanks for your insights in the huge potential of marketplaces and what it takes in terms of organization, manpower, expertise to set up a marketplace. Maybe as a first question, what are the initial costs of setting up a platform in terms of software implementation and integration, and what are sort of the running costs of basically having the team to work on reconciliation, the onboarding process, or basically all the processes that you need to ensure?
Yeah, so the cost of integrating a marketplace is pretty important because marketplace tends to be considered as a long-term investment. It's a product that should find a return on investment, after 1 or 2 or 3 years. So it's not gonna be a short-term, investment for companies. It's really about, transforming your way of selling. So it implies, to invest a couple of money, So initial investment could be from 1 to double according to also the choice that you are doing. If you just start from scratch by building your own marketplace system, which is kind of, if you don't know and you are not a tech-savvy company, could be a tricky choice. If you just choose to go from scratch for the payment, also not choosing, the right payment actor, it's gonna make the cost, exploding. So it's difficult to give you a figures, about how much does it cost, because it can, go from 1 to 10, according to the choice that you are making during the initial phase of, marketplace development and how you're going to structure your ID,
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. A question about the basically the merchant IDs. you have various merchants on as a marketplace. You have various merchants on your platform. How to assign merchants IDs for various merchants? Who manages the transactions and the fraud management within the platform?
It's interesting to this whole merchant ID debate, because it's already something that we talked a lot with acquirers, and the idea of the merchant, is something that is really key for compliance inside, just to understand how you're going to manage the transaction, how you're going to monitor this. And what is happening is, like most of the time, acquirers will ask the marketplace to provide the full transparency on what is happening from the settlement perspective, or from the reconciliation process. This is why you have some account management API. It's just to give the marketplace should give the split of the payment of the vendors. So even if they use only one merchant ID, the third merchant will be monitored, let's say, pretty separately, or will be integrated into this framework. So but there is a risk, because if you let a third party that doesn't know anything about reconciliation process or settlement, letting you say, okay, what is the settlement and where the money should go to, the numbers of errors are huge. So it's always better for the acquirers to be equipped with their own system, or to source a system that is, resilient and knows how to do it, because marketplace initially are not made for that. They are made to make the intermediation between two parties, and not dealing with payments or compliance.
I see. And Jordan, another question that comes up is, you mentioned being acquiring agnostic as sort of an advantage. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? What is the benefit of having an acquirer agnostic setup, especially when you expand internationally?
So being acquirer agnostic to expand internationally is extremely crucial, in fact, because acquirers, especially for Visa and MasterCard, that are, let's say, the main used scheme that counts for between 30 to 40% of the transaction. The figures varies, from providers by providers, but anyway, Visa and MasterCard are still the biggest schemes, and they are organized by jurisdictions, So if you have an acquirer, you have to sign with an acquirer that are within your jurisdiction. So you have to be connected to multiple acquirers in order to reach all the jurisdictions, in order to be sure that you stay compliant with Visa and MasterCard. So it's also because of the schemes rules and how the whole, schemes are structured and the rules that they have, that you should have much more agnosticity in your platform. Also, something that is really important, about that is that if you are much more agnostic, you can also spare some cost, because you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So there might be, some more interest, or you can make some substantial, cost saving by using multiple acquirers, because they could be, put in competition to each other, so you don't have to rely on one single acquirer, but just, rely on multiple ones.
Yeah, makes sense. Hey, Jordan, 2 questions about the merchant ID. First, do you assign a merchant ID to each vendor? And secondly, is the merchant ID managed by the marketplace entity? And if so, how do you onboard vendors, and how do you segregate their funds?
Yeah, so the merchant ID is never handled by the marketplace. So my merchant ID will be in our technology, in our account management services, and we will be the one that handle all the merchant IDs. So there will be roughly, we work hand in hand with the acquirers for that, according to also what the risk is prone to or not prone to. And for the vendors onboarding, we have the constraint of the marketplace. The vendors onboarding, is different from the usual, and traditional set up with acquirers, most of the time, opening and acquiring account, can take weeks to be opened. And here, the sellers are expected to be onboarded within a week. So we have to provide an interface for the onboarding, that take all the complexities and integrate, into the interface all the complexities from the acquirers, while providing a sleek user experience for the sellers. And this is where we Limonetik act. We also provide this KYC interface between the acquirers and the sellers.
And so if the merchant ID is managed by the marketplace, how do you onboard vendor? How do you segregate their funds? That was the question.
Yeah, so the fund segregation will be done by us in our infrastructure. So the split of the vendors is made at the transactional level. So when a payment is happening, we will split the vendors information. We get the split information from the marketplace, either from Mirakl or from the marketplace itself, because we can receive any type of information from the split and any type of commissions. So the split of the vendors will be done by ourselves using a payment institution we work with. So the payment institution will segregate the funds and following the usual, let's say, compliance, requirements from the regulators. So each of the merchants will be underwritten into the payment institution accounting books, and each of the payouts that will be done on the marketplace will be traced into the framework. So no risk to be paid out, for example, if you don't have the money or such, because we have all the split of the vendors, we receive all the settlements from the acquirers. So we make a perfect junction between acquirers and companies that should provide payout and scoring services.
Okay, cool. Jordan, thank you so much for taking the questions.
And it was mainly payment oriented questions, so it's okay.
Well, we touched upon some other questions in the conversation. So thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you, audience, for your time. We will send all of you a link to the webcast shortly, and we will get back to questions that we did not have time to include in this webinar. I wish you all a very good day and hope to see you in the next webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.